Kima, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Akeem? See, I'm talking to you. That's why it's important for us to do a video test. Kima,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Kenneth, can you hear us? 5 count.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we
No,
good?
Kima. That's good. Hey, Kima, I need you to promote Juan up here again.
You need what?
I need you to promote Juan
Okay, once I start to hear, I'll promote him.
with a day is.
Okay, when I start to hear.
Hey, Ken, if you can hang the phone up.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call to order this public roundtable of the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety. I'm Councilmember Brooke Pinto, representing Ward 2 and Chairwoman of the committee. The time is now 2:53 p.m. on Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. We are conducting this roundtable in person in room 500 of the John A. Wilson Building and virtually via Zoom. We're also streaming on the DC Council website and on YouTube and X at @CM Brooke Pinto. The purpose of today's public roundtable is to discuss the merger of our violence intervention programs within the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, or ONES, and the Office of Attorney General's program called Cure the Streets. If you recall, we held 2 roundtables last fall regarding the ONES office. The first roundtable was held October 7th, 2024 to discuss issues related to oversight of grant recipients under the Violence Intervention Program. And the second roundtable was held on December 2nd, 2024 to discuss the future of our VI programs, and that outline is what we are currently working, the outline of what was working and what needs to be changed. Today, we will focus on how we move forward to implement a merger of the ONES VI program and OAG's Cure the Streets program to be housed under ONES. We will also discuss improvements to increase the effectiveness of our VI programs, ensure that we are being good stewards of taxpayer dollars with robust and transparent grant making and contracting, and generally improve the public trust of our violence interruption programs. It didn't make sense, but it especially no longer makes sense to continue operating with 2 separate programs in the city. I don't want us to look back 10 years from now and say, we really should have done this 10 years ago, but we never got around to it. So I say that to say there are still pain points and there are still avenues that we need to work out, but I do believe that we need to move forward with one system. As I've said before, I believe in violence interruption as a model and as a critical part of our public safety ecosystem. Working in partnership with community-based organizations, our violence interrupters engage in meaningful and challenging work to discourage violence and connect folks at high risk of being involved in violent incidents with needed resources and opportunities. Our violence interrupters do the exceptionally hard work of building relationships with community members, mentoring people at high risk of being victim or perpetrator of violence, de-escalating conflicts, and facilitating ceasefires and mediations. I've heard several concerns from the community about fearing that the merger will result in the closure of current VI sites or in a reduction of staff. I want to be clear that that is not my intention. I believe that we need to continue supporting the CBOs as we do this merger going forward. It's important to me that we do not lose or disrupt the good work that our VIs are doing during this transition. And I look forward to hearing from our public witnesses today about the strategic advantages and disadvantages of doing this with the ward-based approach as been recently announced by ONES versus a neighborhood-based approach. With this discussion today, I also hope we can take additional steps forward towards a merger of our VI programs, which I believe will have positive impacts on reducing gun violence and making sure that we have quick avenues to connect people to the wraparound services that they need. Most of those resources are handled through mayoral sister agencies, which will be easier and faster to do if everything is under ONES. I also want to recognize the very important and good work that folks at Cure the Streets have done in building up this program and their CBOs have done, and we don't want to lose that good work in the merger. I also want to note a very concerning announcement that was made last night. I got wind of this late last evening that the Department of Justice changed their view on grants that not only were to go out, but had already gone out in the violence interruption space. And that is extremely concerning to me, not only to what it could mean to our local CBOs, but what it means around the country. This effort was passed on a bipartisan basis to recognize years ago that this work is really important and is a part of how we build safer communities. And so to see this administration go back on what really had been a bipartisan recognition is extremely disappointing and I think very unsafe. And so we are looking into the details of how we can push back against this, how we can continue to bolster this work locally. But my and my team's commitment to this has not changed. And we're very disappointed to see that announcement. So we're going to turn to our public witnesses today, and then at a later date, we're going to have a roundtable with our government witnesses to talk about more of the specifics around the merger as well. But want to make sure that's informed by what we hear today. So we're going to call our first panel of public witnesses. If I could ask the first person to sit to my right, and then we'll proceed. Kirby Garrity, Olivia Buckley, Philip Johnson, Chandra Dawson. You testifying in place of Olivia Buckley? Okay. Okay. We will begin with Kirby Garrity, Senior Fellow for Community Safety, Greater Washington Community Foundation.
All right, thank you. Thank you, council member and members of the committee. My name is Kirby Garrity, and I'm the Senior Fellow for Community Safety and Harm Reduction at the Greater Washington Community Foundation. I appreciate the effort that has gone into the Peace DC plan because, as we know, the most effective way to prevent community violence is to coordinate a comprehensive community-based strategy that links various proven public health tools such as community violence intervention, a violence reduction strategy, hospital-based violence intervention programs, and/or trauma-informed care through essential supports and services. When it comes to CVI, a focus on the small number of people engaging in violence in a city is key, which is why coordination and data-informed approaches are necessary. Right now, we are seeing threats to this life-saving work by the federal government, and we are in a time where local commitments and philanthropic partnerships are essential, as is engagement with the private sector. Steps back toward carceral approaches to public health issues will prevail if we don't work together. My work involves the coordination of the DC Community Safety Collaborative, a group that aims to engage those cross-sector partners at one table, where we work to develop and advance community safety priorities for DC, with specific attention to the CVI ecosystem. In doing so, I've had the privilege of working with and getting to know many of the local leaders in the violence prevention and intervention space. And over the last 10 months, we've developed recommendations, some of which align with Peace DC. Through the Office of the Attorney General, the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, Peace for DC, NARC, Project Change, and many more, I've learned both about the successes and challenges in the local system. But one thing that I know for sure is that there's a committed network of people that want to prevent and intervene in violence here in the city, and they do so each day. Our merger of the two main CVI programs in the city could lead to a stronger and more coordinated system of support for those experiencing violence. However, it is very important that it is not done without a thoughtful approach. There are some considerations we see as key, some of which align with those in the plan. First, collaborate with Dr. Joseph Richardson and Daniel Webster, who have been evaluating this work in DC and can help the transition team in understanding the landscape, what is possible, and how to ensure that the work is sustainable. I know we'll hear from them a little later. Next, provide capacity supports to ones to ensure there's a solid infrastructure in place to hold and scale this important work, inclusive of the use of a model rooted in data and evidence with an understanding of local nuance and the importance of qualitative factors. Currently, the OAG's Cure the Streets program utilizes an evidence-based approach, Cure Violence. Additionally, a strong group of OAG team members support the CVI teams, and their processes for dispersing funds and organizing data are clearly defined. If a merger takes place, these processes and systems should be prioritized, even if via a new model or coordinated approach under the leadership of ones. Finally, collaboration with Project Change and the HVIP ecosystem in the region is essential for a continuum of care to exist. Peace DC outlines a plan for this merger and contains a lot of important steps to ensure that this is successful. A few things that are not explicitly included that we think are important are, while this plan is focused on the district, there is much to learn from other cities and national experts. Two, CBO and nonprofit leaders of the CVI movement should be on the transition team, as they are the experts in this work and how it plays out on a day-to-day basis. Three, the new and expanded requirements for VI teams should include increased support to the individuals doing this work, inclusive of increased compensation, career development pathways, and benefits. At the foundation, we want to support where we can, and our collaborative hopes to ensure that the frontline workers are supported and empowered as we do this work each day. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, could you state your name and position for the record that we don't, because we have you listed as Olivia Buckley.
Yes, I am not Olivia Buckley, although she's awesome. I am Reverend Rob Keithan, one of the ministers at All Souls Church Unitarian in Columbia Heights, and I am also a member of and speak on behalf of the Washington Interfaith Network Public Safety Team. Do you want me to keep going?
Yes, you can proceed. Thank
Thanks. So
I'm
based,
sorry, Robert, could you spell your full name?
sure, yes, it's Robert, Robert. Last name is Keithan, Keithan.
Great. Okay.
Thank
Now you
you.
can go ahead. Thank you.
So based on extensive research and listening to directly impacted folks in the last 5 years, our WIN public safety team strongly supports merging the two VI programs. We're grateful to see this proposal moving forward, but we do have some questions and concerns. We really appreciate that there will be an advisory team and believe it's critical that frontline workers are from all levels are included, not just management, into the planning conversation, and that when people with the most expertise are left out, the result will inevitably include problems and pitfalls that could have and should have been avoided. For example, we hear again and again that small amounts of money make all the difference for people who are on edge. And more than a few frontline workers end up giving their own money to people in need. And these selfless acts of compassion are incredible, and they should not need to happen. So the new VI program must have a standardized and better approach that actually works for the workers, but the only way you get there is if the workers are included in the process. We're also very pleased to see that the ones would be required to follow an evidence-based model, but are surprised and concerned that the proposal doesn't seem to involve the transition advisory team in that critical process, which is arguably the most important decision of all that affects the future. So we would love to see that changed and to have other written expectations about how the ones will solicit and consider feedback in the selection of an evidence-based model. Also, of course, the work in these programs is highly demanding, often requiring long hours, extensive emotional bandwidth, and financial resources outside of what's provided. So we ask that the proposal require standardizing generous compensation and benefits for all frontline workers. And we do hope that all current sites are maintained, appreciate that commitment, would love to see data from the CJCC and frontline workers used to figure out sort of how to expand and where to expand in that work. And kind of as a final note, you know that the WIN public safety team is very much interested in genuine and sustainable public safety and appreciate measures like violence prevention and would love to see greater investments in housing and education and jobs and the things that we know help our communities sustainably and in the long term. Thank you for your work on this, and we're happy to be a partner on this and other aspects of public safety going forward.
Great. Thank you, Reverend Keithan. Philip Johnson, public witness.
Can y'all hear me? All right, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the council for the opportunity to speak here. This is my first time testifying in any capacity at anything, so please forgive me if I'm not very polished. So from my standpoint personally, I'm testifying as an individual, even though I have done some of this violence interrupter work and I'm doing some peripherally related work, I'm still testifying in my own capacity. But the work that I've done with regards to the violence interrupter work is work inside the hospital. So this law doesn't necessarily pertain specifically to the hospital violence interrupters. I assume primarily because the hospitals are private entities. But I do have some insight into that work. I know a lot of the violence interrupters that work on the street level. Obviously, I've collaborated with them in a variety of different, events, different protocols, different opportunities and methods in which we try to work together. So nobody's going to disagree that there needs to be more collaboration and cooperation between the violence interrupters and not just on the street level in the hospitals, but also with one's office. But we do have concerns as opposed to, the way this is structured. We do want to ensure that the people who are being listened to primarily are the ones who are doing this work, because it seems to a lot of people that The proposals here are seeking to wrest control from the individuals doing the work. We understand that with what's going on politically with regards to, Councilmember White and some of the other things surrounding the programs, that there's a lot of scrutiny. But we don't want to see those as pretext to try and see people that don't really have the expertise to try and swoop in and control who is doing what, who talks to who, and how people are interacted with. I think that the city council should be, I feel they would be well informed to know that the ones who are bearing the lion's share of the burden of street violence are the people who are doing the frontline work. Not only do we know the individuals personally in terms of we know them their entire lives, so they're friends, they're family members, they're people that we love, and we say that we love them in the sense that we cry for these people, we sweat for these people, we bleed for these people, and at the same time we carry their caskets. So for those who aren't carrying caskets, who can't stand on blocks, who can't have conversations, who don't know the people who are in these specific situations, who don't know the details, who said what, why somebody did what, why these young people over here and why these young people over here are beefing with each other with beefs that they can't understand for the last 30 years. They can't tell you what happened 30 years ago, but they can tell you about the last 3 funerals they went to. But none of you all can say anything about that. And you need to listen to the people who cry at these places. You need to listen to the people whose blood is on the street. You need to listen to the people who are carrying caskets. I've carried caskets, my friends' caskets. I want to know how many people in the city council have seen their friends not make it to 40, not make it to 30, not make it to 21, not make it to 18. So I don't want to, overstep my time. But I would like the a little bit more scrutiny on who's on this advisory council, this transitional council. I do have concerns about a ward-based approach because there are some wards that aren't dealing with this. So why should somebody in, your ward, Brooke Pinto, tell people in Ward 7 how it is they're going to deal with their situations that they're only ever going to be peripherally involved when? Maybe if they have a run-in with somebody unhinged downtown. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that, and I'll come back for some questions in a moment. Chandra Dawson, Interim Executive Director, Peace for DC.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Pinto, members of the committee and staff. I am Chandra Dawson, and I serve as the Interim Executive Director for Peace for DC. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Peace for DC is grateful for the partnership of both OAG and WUNS in the community violence intervention space, and we maintain our commitment to collaboratively provide support and inform violence intervention in the District of Columbia. As you are aware, we operate the Peace Academy, which is the district's only classroom-based training program for violence intervention workers. To date, we have welcomed over 175 peacemakers to the academy. Excitably, we just had our 8th cohort graduate yesterday. These numbers include individuals employed by both WUNS and other district government agencies, as well as individuals employed by community-based organizations serving as WUNS and OAG contractors. Chairperson Pinto, we support your commitment to developing the needed unified governance and delivery of community violence intervention services. However, we believe the proposed merger must support the needs of the district CVIs, CBOs, and the communities they serve. In addition to my current role as Interim Executive Director, I also serve as a licensed social worker supporting the trauma needs of district residents. I am before you today to highlight the trauma support needs of both CVI service providers and the individuals and communities they serve. Primarily, the finalized merger must reflect the understanding of the populations OAG and WUNS serve. The merger of OAG and WUNS is a major system service delivery shift. Such a dramatic change must incorporate needed planning time, resources, and skills to prevent service disruptions and protect engagement offered to trauma survivors. The absence of these provisions can result in trauma re-victimization, exacerbated grief and loss, and a variety of clinical presentations. Unfortunately, many of the trauma survivors supported by CVI services have not developed the needing coping skills to manage change, which can consequently result in varying forms of facilitated violence and harm. In addition, the following remarks outline the training needs for violence interrupters. We agree with many of the identified topics, especially cognitive behavioral intervention, which is an evidence-based strategy for addressing trauma and successfully reducing violence. Peace for DC was the first to bring Brokers Rewire CBT training to DC, and it serves as the core element of our Peace Academy. However, to achieve the desired goals of CBT training, the district must ensure the fiscal capacity and resources to facilitate CBT refresher training, communities of practice, and ensure CBO leadership is equipped to operationalize CBT within their day-to-day operations and more. Trauma and healing and behavioral change cannot be achieved with the facilitation of a sole CBT training or a training model that only engages frontline workers. In addition, the required trainings don't reflect the well-being needs of the VI workforce. Peace for DC recommends the merger plan incorporates solicited feedback from practitioners skilled in addressing individual, community, and workplace trauma. Also, the proposed advisory committee should include behavioral health expertise tasked to monitor and evaluate merger implementation. Also, the current plan highlights needed service coordination for wraparound services offered to identified individuals. We strongly support increased service coordination and the implementation of a service model designed to meet the needs of the whole person. While the district is often recognized for its vast array of services, all human service providers right now are currently experiencing varying degrees of fiscal uncertainty and strain. The provision of wraparound services will require a long-term fiscal investment, enabling the development and sustainability of individualized, culturally appropriate wraparound services. We too suggest the plan reflect the delivery and monitoring of such services, which is much more impactful than the outlined service coordination requirement. Again, a streamlined CVI service model is supported. As a member of the district CVI ecosystem, Peace for DC appreciates the opportunity to collaborate, shape, and support the implementation needs of a possible once and OAG merger. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Dawson. Thank you all for your testimony and for all of your efforts in this very important work. Mr. Johnson, you could have had me fooled that this is your first time because I think you did great, and I really appreciate your viewpoint. I heard a lot of consistency around this idea that we need to make sure we have the right people on this advisory team. And in looking at the kind of membership, our intention in structuring the outline this way was to include people who do this work. The language is something like, subject matter experts in the field of violence interruption, community membership from all the different wards. I would be very pleased to be more specific in the language to make sure that really gets at what you all seem to be hitting on, that we really need to make sure people who have experience doing this work, not just management, are really informing the transition, because that's often where the best ideas come from. And that's frankly where many of the ideas for this merger or for this outline have come from. Are there other areas, Mr. Johnson, that you're kind of thinking of when you say, you said you feel like the ideas from this merger are not coming from people who are doing this work or are coming from a certain perspective, kind of what you're referring to?
Not necessarily that the ideas from this merger aren't coming from people doing the work, but kind of how it is going to be implemented, that we don't want to see that it's going to be a bureaucracy at the top, as opposed to people actually, passionate about the work, right? And when you talk about the subject matter experts, we would have, just questions about how you all would determine what a subject matter expert is in some of these situations. Especially for some of our specific neighborhoods, who is the subject matter expert for Paradise and Kenilworth? Does anybody in the city council know who that person would be? Who would OAG know who that person is? Or, the next government agency, especially if those agencies are staffed with people who aren't from these neighborhoods, and then they want to make a decision about what goes on, or who is the one addressing, who is liaison for that neighborhood. How do you determine who that individual is, and where would you get that information from? I think that's one of the things that people have concerns with in terms of making sure that the right people are in place. Like literally, who are these people who are going to be appointed? and where were they coming from? How are you going to be able to identify? How are you going to determine that someone is a subject matter expert? Is that determined based on their experiences, or is it determined based on, credentials, or is it determined based on, reputation or relationships? Where's the metric there?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I mean, I guess I kind of envisioned it as like there are certain people who show up to various community meetings or who we have met with who tell us about the work that they're doing, that could be some of the consideration of who to be appointed. But I hear you, and maybe it would provide people some more comfort to produce that list before we do the merger so that everybody's on the same page of who, I'm just thinking out loud, but of who would be on that advisory team. So it's not so theoretical and like feel so removed, that everybody just knows and could review that list before and make sure that it's representative.
Yeah, it would be helpful for, such a list to, be able to be scrutinized by the public as well, especially if you have a hotspot area, you want individuals from that area to say, well, yeah, that's somebody that we trust. That's somebody that we know for a fact knows what's going on, not just somebody that's going to be a part of some other sort of agenda that, we don't necessarily know about.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I mean, the other kind of reality challenge that we have with this is we can't have an advisory team made up of 100 people. And so there realistically won't be somebody doing this work from every single neighborhood as a part of the advisory team. That doesn't mean they can't inform the work, inform the strategy. But in my experience, when we have advisory teams that are, 30 people or more, all of a sudden the work gets hampered because it can't be as nimble. And that's another challenge that we have, frankly, with this work receiving government funding. Like to your point of not having a bureaucracy, that's a constant challenge for us of how do we get the balance right of making sure that taxpayer dollars that are going to a government agency are dispersed with transparency, with fairness, with competitive grants, but that then we are kind of stepping back and allowing the CBOs to do their work. That's a constant challenge because without any bureaucracy, the work doesn't happen because that's the entity that's funneling the money. But with too much, it's undermining the trust. And so there's not necessarily a solution we can come up with today, but I just share that to say that's one of the challenges that we're always kind of grappling with how we structure a legislative action in this space that is just different than some of our other purely government services.
Yeah, we're absolutely in agreement that a group that's bloated absolutely will not be effective at all. It's just going to further gum up the works. I also think that putting a little bit more, like, because some of the things that we were kind of hoping to see with regards to this work, over the last few years from the city government is a little bit more resources and facilitation with regards to putting the information out, making, we feel as though the city government should be using more resources to help us disseminate the information, make it more widely available, make it more easily consumable, make it so that, there is a database made by the city that where CBOs and hospital organizations and city government programs under ONES or OAG or what have you can put their information in that database so that people can easily reference it. Something that could be even codified by what location they're in, what areas they're in. CBOs in this location, oftentimes could have patients going to this hospital or that hospital, depending on what happened. And this is who you talk to at the hospital. This is who, under the city government is liaison in the whole thing. That's kind of more along the lines of what people are looking to see from the government, facilitation for the information sharing, as opposed to telling people, how to go by this, that, and the third, how to go about doing their work.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think that's definitely something we can try to expand. and provide. Thank you. Ms. Dawson, I want to talk about some of the training that Peace for DC is doing and how you think that can be kind of scaled at this level. It is probably not lost on you that you all have been extremely inspiring to me, and so much so. Peace DC sounds a little like Peace for DC.
Sounded a little familiar.
Yeah. But one of the things that I am so impressed of Peace for DC by is the recognition of the trauma and the healing that needs to happen for the people doing this work. And so one of the things that we put in the outline was this consistent training so that everybody's kind of on the same page of what they need personally as a human being, and also what the kind of best practices are for some of this de-escalation work and other things going on that people may be able to learn from other neighborhoods and other research. So how are you all currently engaging in that training? How many weeks do you provide? And is that something you think could be scaled to be offered to every CVI in the city?
Sure. So just in terms of your first question, most of our training that you're outlining is facilitated through the Peace Academy. So the Peace Academy is 14 weeks and it's 3 cohorts, currently 3 cohorts a year. I think there are quite a few specific attributes, I think, that make the Academy such a rich space. The training, speaking to the gentleman's conversation around expertise, most of facilitators have either done frontline VI work or serve in varying degrees of capacity in the work. It's really not just the provision of professional knowledge, but personal growth and transformation. And so we empower many of our alumni, should I say, that have graduated to come back and seed and give back to those. So it's this ongoing planting and watering type of dynamic. Now, we recognize, I think for us, we look at the perpetuation of gun violence in a much holistic way or comprehensive way than some others, understanding the trauma piece that contributes to the facilitation of gun violence. And so when I say trauma, I'm talking about individual, familial, community, historical trauma when we're talking about communities of Black and Brown individuals. And so that is the foundation that the curriculum and the topics are built upon. And so one, empowering individuals who are in various stages of transformation to service facilitators. We do support and place a great deal of emphasis on clinical services. Now, culturally appropriate clinical services facilitated by providers who understand this population. Our clinicians aren't necessarily individuals who have served in VI roles, but these are individuals who understand the many presentations of trauma and what it looks like for those that we serve. And so, yeah, for us, we embrace the belief that in order to address this issue, that you have to have a real authentic understanding of trauma. And so it is a space of professional as well as personal development. And so when I look at the list of identified trainings, which again, many of that is offered at our Peace Academy, I think it's imperative that however it's structured and facilitated, it is offered through a lens of trauma understanding. Now, can we scale and do that? Yes, we've been doing it. We are the training space for the city. This is what we've been doing since inception. And so we definitely, with support, and when I say support is, I think we would definitely should have voice in what the development of the training would look like with the merger, but also the development. I have to be transparent. We are one of those agencies that have just been impacted by DOJ and other funding. And so this would require a fiscal investment on part of the city for us. We have been doing this up to date free. Complimentary to the city. And so for us to scale, that would require a different conversation around collaboration with the city for us, but it can be done.
This is a little bit of a hard question because I know it depends on how long the training and exactly how many people, but do you have a sense of about how much it would cost for a 12-week training program for every CVI in the city to go through Peace Academy?
So I may lean in here for a minute. we had, and they're getting ready to testify after me around some of this, but we roughly, it's about 10,000 per student with the current model.
For your current 14 week.
Yes, the current model. And it's Tuesdays and third, you want to pull it, you should pull a chair, come on. And 2 days a week.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's helpful context. So Reverend and Ms. Garrity, kind of going back to this question of an evidence-based model, and there are a lot of other cities around the country who are doing this important work. And a piece of feedback that I hear all the time that, hey, DC is different. We need to be listening to people who are from DC, who are doing this work in DC, and not kind of think about a model that maybe work in another city but might not work as well here. How do you think we should be thinking about that balance in structuring this merger?
Yeah, I'll just say, I think every city says the same thing. That's one thing I will say, is that we're not Philly, we're not Chicago, we're not Baltimore. So I don't think that any city, and there's other people in the room that could probably correct me if I'm wrong, are doing things exactly the same way, even with evidence-based models. So I think, in transparency, there's the ward-based model. I think there's questions about what is that, what is it based in, how is it being implemented? So not to say that it isn't a model, but when you hear cure violence or cure the streets, you kind of know what that is and what it's rooted in. So I think there is a balance, and there's a lot of folks in other cities and here in DC that could work towards something that works well here. I just think model-less is not the way we want to go.
And I share those concerns about a ward-based model as well, for the record. Go ahead.
Yeah, add me to that list as well. Yeah, I think anytime there's such a transition like this, it's an opportunity to revisit the big picture. And we have a lot of evidence that the cure model works, and it's an opportunity to make changes. I think the WIN public safety team's perspective is more about the process and making sure that folks that are on the front lines, that are in communities that are impacted, have as much voice in that as possible, rather than us having a particular opinion about what the model looks like. We want to trust the right people to make that decision, and for it to be a thoughtful decision, not one that is rushed with unnecessary urgency. There's a lot of people involved in this transition. It should be a careful one. And of course, that doesn't mean it should take forever, but let's take the time and intention to do this right, and to have a model with enough actual trusted subject matter experts that when it launches, it has a lot of community support already behind it.
Sure.
I'll just add one thing, that I know that there's Cure Violence Global, there's ROCA, and there's also Dr. Chico Tillman and Marcus McAllister, all working here in DC with local partners that could probably be a great resource alongside the experts in this room to think about what a model could look like for the city. So there's not a lack of support. I think it's just coordination that needs to happen.
Mhm. Thank you very much. And Mr. Johnson, do you have other thoughts on that, on this conversation of a model that maybe is more strictly adhered to, like a cure model, versus giving a little bit more flexibility to our local CBOs on how they go about their work?
I believe, trying to find some sort of balance is what's key. And I think the work should be in, trying to compromise and finding something that works and can be considered, one, attainable as well as quantifiable, but also something that's going to be effective on the ground. You know, some of the metrics of success that we know are successful aren't really things that can be quantifiable. You can't necessarily quantify the shootings that didn't happen. You can't quantify somebody walking away and nothing going on because there's nothing to report about.
Right.
So, those things also have to be in here, have to be, really thought about. Like we're talking about, real life, real situations. Also, it should be noted that, the violence interrupters, the ones on the streets, are putting their lives on the line. Literally, like several of them have been killed in the, trying to pursue their goals and trying to fulfill basically their work requirements. So with regards to how these people are trained, it has to be tailored to the area. It has to be tailored to the individuals that they're coming in contact with. And from my standpoint, the people who would best know the best processes and methods to do so would be the CBOs who interact with those individuals, know the neighborhood, know the history of the altercations. You know, that seems to me to be the most ethical way to, go about this.
Thank you. And I think that's such an important point. I know people doing this work are always kind of beating this drum, and it's not always picked up by the broader public, is this idea that it is impossible to prove, but for an intervention, violence would have happened. And so when I think about kind of efficacy of dollars being spent, I think about it a little more from the perspective of like what efforts were underway and where did the money go, which CBO secured the money, and then what were their types of interventions as opposed to what specifically happened in each interaction. Because I agree, it's just impossible to quantify and maybe not the best use of time with that element. So thank you. Thank you all so much. The conversation will certainly continue. Really, really appreciate all the work that you all are doing. Okay, we're going to call our next panel, Dr. Joseph Richardson, Dr. Daniel Webster, Roger Marmette, and Earl Yates. Yeah, if you all wouldn't mind going in order. Dr. Richardson, Dr. Webster, Mr. Marmette, and then, okay. All right, we will get started with Dr. Joseph Richardson.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Councilmember Pinto and members of the council for the opportunity to speak today. I am Dr. Joseph Richardson, the Empower Professor of African American Studies, Medical Anthropology and Epidemiology at the University of Maryland, and I'm also the founding co-director of the University of Maryland Progress Initiative, a university-wide gun violence research initiative that is responsive to gun violence in the National Capital Region and the state of Maryland. I also currently serve as the co-chair of the DC Violence Fatality Review Committee under the DC Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, which I would also add. I should be at my meeting today, but I'm here. My testimony today is based on my expertise in CVI programs in the district as a researcher and as a practitioner. As a researcher and a practitioner in 2016, I developed, implemented, and led the first hospital violence intervention program to serve the district, which at the time, there were no CVI programs that did street outreach in the district that were under the Office of the Attorney General or the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. So as the gentleman mentioned in the prior panel, when someone came into our hospital and was injured, we had no warm handoff to a violence intervention worker. And to a certain extent, I think that relationship is still a bit fractured today. My colleague and I, Dr. Daniel Webster, who's sitting beside me, are currently leading the evaluation to enhance the effectiveness of street outreach violence intervention programs under the Office of the Attorney General, Cure the Streets, and the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, also known as ONES. Based on my observations of both programs, I support the merger because I believe that a more streamlined and unified street outreach community violence intervention approach is what is needed in the district at this time. The vast majority of cities and counties with CVI programs in the United States are led by one governmental agency. This merger aligns with the national CVI landscape. It's my hope that the merger will improve the coordination of intervention efforts and resources in the district's CVI ecosystem. In addition, the merger should address some key concerns which were already mentioned by previous panelists today, such as a livable wage for frontline workers, support for affordable housing, and I mean in terms of supporting affordable housing for CVI workers in the same way that we would support housing vouchers and housing programs for other city workers such as policemen, fire and EMS, and school teachers. Also health, dental, and life insurance, mental health and self-care resources, timely reimbursements, and pathways for professional advancement and social mobility, as well as additional measures to keep frontline workers safe because they engage in dangerous life or death work every day. Furthermore, as the district's CVI strategy shifts to award-based approach, more funding is needed to increase staffing to ensure community-based organizations have the capacity to provide services to distressed neighborhoods throughout each ward, and that violence interrupters are not stretched too thin to effectively do the work, which may further contribute to burnout. I also think that the community-based organizations should be included in this conversation regarding the rollout of award-based approach, which, based on my conversations with many of the frontline workers and leadership in the city, I don't think that that conversation has occurred. In terms of the CVI model, while the CURE model has shown promising results over the last 30 years, the model in many respects is outdated in the current CVI landscape. The contemporary social context of violence in the district as well as across the nation is much different now with the emergence of social media and drill music. And in the district, the impact of the rapid gentrification on housing has destabilized many communities. The merger provides an opportune time to re-examine the CURE model and its relevance to whether the reality of doing the day-to-day work of violence intervention aligns with the model in its current iteration. Some of our preliminary observations have uncovered innovative community-centered approaches used by frontline workers that may have promise if they can be conceptually framed and tested. I would also add that there should be more of a focus that centers on prevention among younger high-risk populations. Currently, one of the policies, which is quite challenging, is that frontline workers, at least under the ones, are unable to work with young people under the age of 18. And we know that that population, at least in the district, compared to other cities across the nation, has higher rates of engaging in violent crime than other cities. In conclusion, I believe in CVI in the district and the individuals and organizations committed to reducing violence in our communities. The merger is a first step in the right direction, but the city also needs a sound strategic CVI plan, coordinated CVI ecosystem, and oversight for the merger to be successful. I thank you, Councilmember Pinto, for the invitation to share my thoughts today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Richardson. Dr. Daniel Webster.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairperson Pinto, for the opportunity to testify in this hearing. I'm Daniel Webster. I'm a professor at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health and distinguished scholar with the Center for Gun Violence Solutions. I've been studying gun violence and its prevention for over 30 years and studying CVI programs since 2007. And as Dr. Richardson mentioned, we are dynamic duo, if you will, evaluating CVI in the district. In many respects, I want to just say I agree with everything my colleague just said. So that's the easy part. I'm going to drill down just in a few other points, though. I clearly support the idea of a merger to be effective in violence interruption. You have to have connectivity, right? And our violence is not compartmentalized in little places where people can just do the work by themselves. So having a true system, I think, is a great goal, and 100% support that. I want to speak to a minute about sort of those evidence informed or evidence-based models. And Dr. Richardson made the point that the cure violence model that goes back many, many decades, quite frankly, is a little bit outdated. And that doesn't mean it's completely irrelevant. Violence interruption is still a thing that is needed, but the nature of the violence has changed. And a very strong recommendation that I have to be the most effective in your approach is to have some systematic process for reviewing shootings. Our center promotes something called a Violence Reduction Council approach. It involves multiple different entities looking at the details of data and coming to conclusions about what is driving this violence in this particular place and time. And that should definitely inform how you structure your violence interruption model. It also, quite frankly, will help someone like me who's trying to evaluate the efficacy of these programs. I can only look at shooting events now. Some of those shooting events, quite honestly, the very best violence interrupter on this planet could not prevent. Okay, a road rage situation. There's a variety of situations. So we need good data to understand how to structure the program, how to make adjustments as we go, and really to evaluate its efficacy. I'll just briefly also say on models. There's a lot of studies of cure violence. I've done several of them. We see some great effects, in some place not. What explains why you get some good effects and some not? We're still learning, but I'll tell you one very basic fundamental thing is, do you simply have enough staff? And I think in the district, we have made a mistake if we spread our violence interruption resources way too thin. And what I really hope this whole process leads us to is a concentrated, focused approach that really is intensive enough, that does all the things that Dr. Richardson was just saying in terms of what a model should look like, and also informed by the data. But to really move the dial, you have to be intensive enough. And so it means making hard decisions about where you're going to concentrate this work. And if you don't do that, I don't think, again, sort of the best models and whatever, you will not achieve what you want to achieve. So that's the main thing I want to leave you with is focus and be informed by that data. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I agree. And I worry that this conversation of a ward-based model, I mean, I have had some encouraging conversations with Director Sneed about this, that seems to be they're envisioning more of a response model. Like, it's not as though all the CBOs will now be based out of Ward 2 and 3 the same way they are based out of 5, 7, and 8, but that if there's a flare-up or a possibility of a retaliatory shooting, that there'll be teams who are aware of that context of the conflict to be able to be dispersed. And so, notwithstanding a kind of response situation, I do think we have to get more comfortable with the idea that we have to be really targeted to focus on gun violence prevention. We're not going to stop every crime that happens everywhere in the city overnight, but this is meant to be for gun violence reduction. So, thank you. Roger Marmette.
I am grateful to be here, grateful for all of the work that you've done. Just to piggyback on the point you just brought up, community response is not community violence intervention. Survivor support is not community violence intervention. There's no model in the country that is a ward-based, will be there in a few hours. Community violence intervention is about people with a license to operate in a specific neighborhood who build credibility, who build trust over 365 days out of the year. So as much as I, both as an individual and as a founder of a private philanthropic organization called Peace for DC, support the Peace DC legislation and the idea of a merger, we have to be really careful. And in some ways, this is our opportunity to design the legislation as our moonshot, if you will, to redesign the way we deliver not just street outreach, which is basically all we're funding right now, whether it is through CURE or the One's Office, and to really go to CURE Plus, if you will, or transformation of individuals, which will not happen under either approach because they're funded to just be street outreach. Same issue with hospital intervention, what happens after discharge. Now, the most important piece of this framework is the service coordination, if you will. That wraparound service is really probably the biggest piece missing in DC's efforts. The challenge there, which piggybacks on some of what Mr. Johnson said, is the way it's written now. It's hiring case managers to work at the One's Office and coordinate a whole of government approach. We tried that a couple years ago. The results, because the dedicated funding and walking with people through that journey of transformation was, I believe, handled by 17 different agency heads or deputy mayors. That's not CVI either. That's not life transformation. So I will say a model, it can be unique, but what's required is fidelity. What's required is metrics, experts like the two gentlemen to my left informing. And so the biggest thing I would ask for is, if we believe the One's Office is set up to handle a massive increase in scale, a larger budget for street outreach than they currently have, let's give them the help and the tools they need. Let's require partnership with both local experts and national experts to design what this looks like. Let's design that ahead of turning the light switch on. And thank you, for pushing for advancing the field and believing in the work, because that's critical, and we appreciate that and your leadership on that from the council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marmot. Earl Yates, Member Political Social Actions, Washington, D.C. Alumni Chapter, Kappa Alpha Psi.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, and thank you to the other members of the council. My name is Earl Yates. I'm here today representing the Washington, D.C. Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi. And on its behalf, I thank you for this opportunity to voice our position, not with the professional heavyweight of these other members of the panel, but indeed as stakeholders. The Washington Alumni Chapter's interest and stake in the subject of today's hearing is rooted in our foundational commitment to and ongoing activism in improving the health and well-being and developmental opportunities for the district's youth. In particular, we are engaged in helping those most seriously affected by pervasive gun violence, including violence of all kinds, including gun violence, which is on the streets of their neighborhoods, on the public transportation they take to schools, and sadly sometimes on the playgrounds and inside the schools that they attend. As an example, I want to make special note here of an activity that is very dear to us and very important to us in the fraternity at large, because it's a core element of the community services mission that we do, but also, and it's done by all the chapters around the country. And it's one that the point is that it's one that can best achieve its goals if it's operating in an environment that is free of the threats and realities of violence close up that the folks we're talking about are experiencing. The activity I'm talking about is called Kappa League. It's a program for educational, occupational, and social development for male students in grades 6 through 12. In that time, in their foundational years, we look to engage with them and provide them mentoring and training in areas of personal development, social skills, their educational advancement, and moving toward career selection and their life's work. Again, to make this work, to have it work, we find that it requires a physical and social environment through which these young men can move and progress. And in those instances in which their daily fare is close-up violence, it surely impedes the outcomes of that. So all the suggestions that I've heard today and in terms of continuing to change or moving forward would feed that. So based on all this, our position is fully supporting what we understand to be the aim of merging all existing and potentially new legislative initiatives. That is to address in the most comprehensive way possible the levels and varieties of violence affecting DC residents, especially its youth. We believe that thoughtful and good faith merging of the range of existing or new alternative legislation initiatives would in turn better enable the district's executive branch and its operating agencies to pursue the most effective program possible. And we see the examples of legislation that are on the table. We look at them, some have more, some have less, but they're of the same cloth. And we as stakeholders for the things that our fraternity stands for and for what our city's youth especially have at stake, our message is by all means, do the same cloth activities and get on with it. We thank you for the opportunity to make some stakeholder thoughts as part of this. And in closing, Madam Chair, we just want to remind you of our fourth annual Wall Street Front Row Legislative Day that will take place on May 15th, and we invite or re-invite all members of the council to join us for that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here. I believe I've been at every one of your legislative days and look forward to joining you as well this year. I actually want to start with you and this discussion of youth that we also heard a little bit from Dr. Richardson of this idea of getting more prevention to our young people. What have you found in Kappa Leagues that has been kind of most effective at helping our young people that we can think about scaling? And then as we think about violence prevention specifically reaching young people, do you envision this through kind of a distinct workforce focused on young people, or more just lifting the guardrails so that the current CVIs can engage with people of all ages? I'm sorry,
Well,
Mr.
I might
Yates.
say one of the things that we found, if I may, in Kappa League is that it's very important to develop in these boys that we start with in 6th grade a sense of self, who they are, what their possibilities are, not to have them be turned away from that by frivolous things, and then to instill in them the confidence, the skills, and approach to life that we hope keeps them away from these situations. There are certainly no guarantees, but we are amazed to see from when they start in August, presently they're 64, you'll have 4, 5, or 6 of them who will be afraid to say a word. And by the end, they can articulate whether it's on the playground or in school or before a council hearing, what their position is, and it gives them direction and but our goal is to have them be able to recognize the danger situation, what the positive possibilities are, and to pursue those.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So what we have heard in preliminary conversations during our site visits is that many of the VIs are actively working with young people under the age of 18. However, by policy, they're not able to, but they continue to do the work regardless because as we've heard consistently in many conversations, if you're not working with that young person that's 12, 13 years old will be tomorrow's shooter, right? And so excluding them from the services is actually, in my estimation, very counterproductive. And so one of the ways that the frontline are able to get to that kid is through the parents. And we haven't talked about that either, is a real holistic approach, not just to a young person, but also inclusive of their families and the social networks that those young people are embedded in, which should be included in the model, right? It shouldn't be just about the individual, but all the people who are connected to that person. So I think that in order to get ahead of it, we definitely need to focus on prevention. And I'll just give you one example of an incident that I was aware of. And people are probably familiar with this. So we know in Washington, D.C., that there are kids who buy expensive clothes. Their parents may buy them for them. One thing is moose knuckle coats, which we've heard about in the media, and also whether Balenciaga sneakers, for example. And this has been going on since the beginning of time. When I was young, there were starter jackets, right? I'm aging myself right now. But there were two young people. I think one was 16, the other was 14. They lived in the same neighborhood. 16-year-old robs the 14-year-old for his moose knuckle coat. But because of the VI, they're not able to work with kids that are under 18. There was an informal VI in the neighborhood who was not getting paid, but worked in the capacity of a VI who was able to bring those two kids together with the person that was the actual VI in that neighborhood to get the coat back. Why is that so important? Because if the coat didn't come back, that may have potentially led to an all-out war in the neighborhood over a coat. And so just in terms of prevention, and the way that many of the VIs speak about these situations of getting ahead of it, not being told or contacted to go out to a site after a shooting has occurred, but putting more emphasis on how can VIs be more actively engaged with young people. So I do think that we should invest in VIs engaging in that work that are already doing it because they have the reputation and credibility in those communities. But there should be additional resources as well that are in schools. And I'll speak just from my role and capacity as the co-chair of DC Violence Fatality Review Committee. One of the things that I consistently see in our case reviews with young people, if there's one common thread that ties all of these cases, let me say two, that tie all of these cases together, it's usually the person that we're reviewing that's under the age of 24 is probably not finished high school. Two, they're chronically absent from school. All of the cases. So if we really want to think about the social determinants of health and moving upstream in terms of addressing structural violence, these deaths are preventable. And if we don't prevent them, we are complicit. Everyone has to take accountability for that level and complicity in social murder, because that's what it is. And so when we know that we can prevent it, and we know that these are the causes, particularly in our schools where we see east of the river, chronic absenteeism rate in some schools is 80%. Who would allow that in any city, in any county in this country? It's unacceptable that 80% of the kids that attend schools are chronically absent. We recently did a feature for NBC News 4 for an investigative report by Ted Oberg. There were 564 schools out of 566 schools in DC between 2014 and 2023 that experienced a shooting. There's one school, I think, that we focused on, Ketchum, which I know many people know where it's located on Good Hope Road. They had experienced in a nine-year period, 184 shootings within 500 yards of that school. You can do the math, right? And so this is what I'm really trying to get at in terms of the investment in the violence prevention. And that is not violence prevention in the way that we may think about it, with intervening with one kid pulling out a gun on another. It starts with the violence of allowing an 80% chronic absenteeism rate. It starts with allowing young people not to graduate high school, where that becomes the common denominator in all the cases that we see in our homicide review. And that's the kind of investment that we need.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for highlighting that. It is extremely troubling, and I agree, absolutely not acceptable. And in Peace DC, as I say, it's some legislative efforts, some funding strategies, like majorly increasing our funding for truancy prevention, and recognizing that if a child has missed 5 days of school, we need to be intervening. I went to a community school in Maryland and asked the students, were like 7 years old, the 8-year-olds, the 9-year-olds, about how the student attendance worked. They all could answer to a T, literally in unison, what happens if you missed 5 days of school? What happens if you missed 10 days of school? Then my parents have to come in for a meeting. It was like the students had been so wonderfully educated on the problems with missing school that they were a part of it, in a way that was so inspiring, because these are young people just a couple miles over the border, and we can do a much better job with truancy. So many kind of questions just arose, but as we think about next steps, Professor Webster and Mr. Marmette, both of you kind of talked about, in slightly different ways, this idea of being really specific about what the model is before we move forward. So just practically speaking, the council is going to get the budget, in theory, in the next couple of weeks. The fiscal year begins October 1st. So in this budget, we could transfer these funds to implement this merger at the start of the fiscal year, October 1st, 2025. What would need to happen in the next 6 months to ensure that we're ready for that?
Well, I think bring together the kind of expertise that you've already talked about is really critical. I will actually volunteer to write a short paper about key models in the CVI space and the evidence. So I hope that will be helpful. But I do think I think it was Kirby mentioned that we should hear from people both here that understand DC, but also in other places. My own take, I have to say, that I'm sure that there's some dimensions of gun violence that are unique in DC, but there's a lot more similarities across cities than there are differences. And so we really should learn from what these other cities have been doing and the lessons that they've taken away. So I think that's really critical. The other thing is, this gets back to the comments I made in my opening remarks, but a decision about where to focus and how broad. I think that is so key to pin down before October 1 and things get going, because everything will be dependent upon where you're actually going to do the work and who has capability to reach those at greatest risk for being involved in shootings in those places. So those are among the key things that I think would have to happen is, again, I hope that this process will be informed by data. It's not hard to find out where shootings are most concentrated, of course. And again, I realize this is maybe beyond my wish here of sort of what's capable under this legislation, but I do think that a shooting review process built into this whole mechanism will really enhance it. And, you know, Dr. Richards is already engaged in this for the district and fatality review, but what he's able to do in that process is a little bit different for the in-depth work that I think could inform CVI. So those are things that I would say, and I'm sure Roger has a lot of thoughts about training.
And I'm sorry, before we turn to Roger, I just want to ask about the shooting review issue, because in Secure DC, we set up the requirement that there's a shooting review. It's my understanding that those reviews are happening, but what do you want to see done differently to be most effective there?
Yeah, so there's two things. One is actually collecting the data and analyzing the data. It's one thing to sort of, okay, we're going to talk about, you know, 3 shootings today, and we'll go through the process, and then we'll do the same thing next week. But you need to systematically collect data so you can understand patterns over time. So that's first and foremost. The second is, and this is a harder lift, I recognize, but I think an engagement of different entities that can inform that review. Law enforcement has certain things that they could say and bring to the table to understand that shooting. VIs will have their own perspectives on that, as will potential other city agencies. So sometimes you have shootings that are concentrated around alcohol outlets, just as an example. For a particular shooting review, you may say, hey, let's bring in alcohol control folks to this conversation for this review. And so it's really thinking about this as a public health problem, that there's a law enforcement dimension, there's a violence interruption dimension, and then there's all these other situational determinants that either facilitate or constrain violence, that city lighting, street lighting, you know, we could, again, kind of go down that list. But in that review process, the eyes and orientation is all about prevention. What just happened and what could have prevented that? And it's great that a set of VIs are doing that now. Wonderful. But a violence reduction council kind of sort of like really embrace this idea, like, this is a public health problem. We are going to totally understand it. And sometimes it's violence intervention that is the medicine, so to speak. And sometimes it's something slightly different or some combination.
Thank you. Mr. Marmot.
Well, 2 things. And sometimes I say things because I've already lost that I care most about. It ties back to what both of these gentlemen said. What needs to happen between now and October 1st for this to be successful? Partnership. And not, here we've done it, it's October 1st, and the one's office is going to figure out the plan, which is kind of how it's framed here. Partnership would mean that the shooting review that did happen, and you can ask about it tomorrow, did happen in this building today. Well, maybe you would have had people like these 2 experts and researchers who are all about the data, who are all about connecting the dots to truancy, to the other elements that are determinants of that. So don't know who was in the shooting review, but we cannot solve this crisis in the city if the government agencies approach it like it's a gated community and partners are not at the table in a robust and meaningful way. So I don't know how you write that into the legislation. I don't know how you write in the adoption of a strategic plan that would connect some of the dots, but that's, you know, that's the big thing that I think a lot of people in different ways are crying out for. CJCC, OAG, independent researchers should all be part of designing what this future looks like of CVI in DC.
Thank you. Okay, well, the work certainly continues. I also want to thank especially you three who have been here on this topic on many, many occasions. And want you to know that your advice and thoughts on this are very well received and helpful to us and have really shaped a lot of how we structured this outline. It is not perfect, which is why we're continuing to work on it, but we wanted to put an outline out there as opposed to a kind of formalized bill so people can be more engaged in the process as we figure out together as a community what needs to be laid out in text versus what needs to be more of a commitment from the government and our CBOs. So thank you all very much. Okay, we're going to call our next and last panel, Nikita Gilbert, Dwayne Falwell, Del McFadden. And there are a couple folks who may be joining us online. They might not all be here. Scott Driscoll, Katie Hodge, Tia Bell, Marcus Ellis, and Commissioner Kathy Henderson. As a reminder, if you're joining us online, to please accept your invitation to join as a panelist. We will get started with Nikita Gilbert, public witness.
Hello, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify today. My name is Nikita Gilbert, and I am the program manager for the DC Peace Academy. As you all may know, we are a privately funded evidence-based program by the people who does this work for the people. Thank you for the opportunity again to testify today. I'm going to focus my testimony on recommendation for the merger, which recommends that the city have a violence intervention worker training academy. Peace for DC has fulfilled this recommendation through the DC Peace Academy, and I will take this opportunity to provide you with an overview of our program because our goal is for the city to embrace the academy and for us to be able to train and certify all of DC's community violence intervention workers in one of the most comprehensive training academies in the country. The effectiveness of DC's violence intervention strategy is largely dependent on the investment we make in the individuals serving on the front lines. Community-based outreach teams are the best way to reach and engage with those at higher risk of violence and our peacemakers from the backbone of DC's alternative system of public health and safety. The DC Peace Academy was launched on May 31st, 2022 in partnership with 7 of the incredible community-based organizations who oversee violence intervention, work through contracts with ONE's and OEG's Cure the Street program. Our co-founding organizations are experts in the field and deeply rooted in the community leaders, and we are grateful for their collaboration in bringing the DC Peace Academy to life. To date, the DC Peace Academy is completely funded by private donations. The Academy is a 14-week, 120-hour curriculum focused on the personal and professional development of DC's brave peacemakers and taught by DC's rich network of local experts. Our curriculum is modeled on 2 of the well-established, most respected academies in the nation, Urban Peace Institute in LA and Metropolitan Police Academy in Chicago. And we have received technical assistance throughout from national experts and academics. By strengthening these frontline heroes, we strengthen the district's violence intervention workforce and help shape DC's alternative system of public safety and public health. For many of these violence intervention workers, their time at the academy is the first time they have learned hands-on topics like how to administer Narcan, how to apply a tourniquet and combat gauze to someone with a gunshot wound while awaiting emergency medical personnel, how to hold a restorative justice circle, how to be a life coach, how to conduct mediations, how to practice cognitive behavior theory to heal trauma, how to resolve conflicts, and so much more. We have continued to hone the curriculum. We have included DC government representatives on our academic advisory committee. We have expanded enrollment to include individuals who work at hospital-based violence intervention, and we are training our roving leaders of the Department of Parks and Recreation. Yesterday, we celebrate the graduation of our 8th cohort. I observed a lot of personal development in the students and saw some come out of their shells and get to know their classmates. The students become comfortable debating classroom topics while having the skills to come back to being attentive to a learning environment. I'm most proud of the fact that I know many of the students are taking what they are learning in the Peace Academy and applying it to their jobs. This cohort was also the first to gain enough hours to finish a level 1 to become a life coach under the facilitation of the Love More movement.
Ms. Gilbert?
Yes,
I'm
I'm
sorry to interrupt. You're over time. If I
Okay.
could ask you to summarize and wrap up.
Okay, sure. Making the Peace Academy, I was almost finished. Making the Peace Academy the standard of the violence interrupted training isn't just about efficiency. It's about integrity. It's about investing in what's being proven to work and what our people actually believe in. It's about protecting the lives of both interrupters and communities they serve. Let's not dilute the impact of this work by allowing a patchwork of training programs with inconsistent values, methods, and outcomes. Let's go all in on the Peace Academy, the standard of credible messenger training in our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you know what? This is a very real example in action of the impacts of these congressionally mandated cuts on our city, that we have a timeline now where we can be in this room because of streaming. So very alarming. They continue to they haven't fixed the budget issue yet, but we're still working on it. But thank you. Okay, Del McFadden, Director of Operations of NARC.
How you doing? Good afternoon, Councilmember Pinto and esteemed members of the council. Thank you for the opportunity to address the proposed merger between the Office of Attorney General and the DC Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, WANS. My name is Del McFadden, and I am the Director of Operations for the National Association for the Advancement of Returning Citizens, also known as NARC/Cure the Streets. I commend the Office of the Attorney General for serving as a vital pillar of structure, oversight, and meaningful initiatives within our city. The OAG's accomplishments highlights its exemplary leadership and thoughtful strategic planning, from combating gun violence and addressing childhood trauma to championing civil rights and protecting vulnerable populations from elder abuse. The OAG has consistently upheld justice and equity in its work. These achievements are a testament to the OAG's commitment to the innovation, data-driven decision-making, and its unwavering dedication to serving the community. The WANS office, from its inception, has brought a public health approach to violence prevention, recognizing that reducing crime requires more than law enforcement alone. Its community-based strategies, such as violence interruption and family support services, have been vital in fostering healthier neighborhoods. However, the inception of these two programs, the OAG and WANS, was not part of a comprehensive, unified plan to reduce violence. Political factors led to their separate development, creating a fragmented approach to addressing one of the city's most pressing issues. The proposed merger offers a unique opportunity to correct this oversight. So today is extremely important. By bringing these two offices together, we can create a more cohesive and comprehensive strategy to reduce violence. A unified approach will allow us to streamline efforts, improve resource allocation, and establish centralized oversight. It would also enable us to integrate data systems, providing a clear picture of program outcomes and enhancing our ability to refine strategies. The OAG's office provides clear guidance and oversight through quality site visits, robust data collection, comprehensive technical support, and specialized training. These interactions empower staff to analyze emerging trends in community violence, share critical insight, and exchange effective practices. The program emphasis on accountability and collaboration establishes it as an impactful framework for violence prevention efforts. Moreover, the Cure the Streets model is rooted in evidence-based practice with a proven track record in cities like New York. In New York City, the Cure Violence program has demonstrated measurable success in reducing shootings, fostering community resilience by treating violence as a public health issue. The program employs strategies such as conflict mediation, violence interruption, outreach and to high-risk individuals. These efforts have been instrumental in addressing the root causes of violence and promoting long-term community well-being. I'm gonna sum it up because I have a lot here. That said, we must approach the merger with caution and foresight. If the one's office is not fully prepared for the transition, the merger could exacerbate existing challenges rather than resolve them. Communication gaps and misaligned priorities could undermine the effectiveness of the unified office. This could lead to a loss of trust among community members and stakeholders, jeopardizing the very mission we aim to strengthen. In conclusion, the merger offers a pivotal opportunity to address past challenges and establish a stronger, more unified strategy for violence prevention. By leveraging the strengths of both offices and thoroughly examining current obstacles, we can ensure that this transition benefits our city and residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McFadden, and thank you for being part of this work since its inception in the city. Appreciate your service. Katie Hodge, public witness.
Hi, my name is Katie Hodge. I am here as a concerned resident of Ward 6 and a longtime volunteer with the DC chapter of Moms Demand Action. I commend the ongoing commitment this committee is showing to a holistic approach to public safety. I know the conversation on merging the two programs has a long history, and presumably it's a matter of time. In the proposed transition plan, there's emphasis on preserving the unique strengths of Cure the Streets. In my experience, two different organizations can implement the same program and have very different results. And that can be from the personalities involved, the organizational culture, or differing institutional supports that aren't a direct part of the methodology. I hope that if the intervention programs are merged, that consideration is given to what at DC's Office of the Attorney General has facilitated success and whether something similar exists or can be implemented in the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. An aspect of the transition plan I am happy to see is training for frontline workers and their supervisors. Violence interruption is a kind of social work and care given in our communities. Our society has a very long history of undervaluing care work, including very low pay scales and taking for granted the skills it requires to do the work. This transitional period is a moment of reconstruction where the district can set a tone about the value of our communities and the community members doing this work. The phrase living wages comes to mind from things people have said earlier. I mean, I certainly, at this point in my life and career, like imagining considering a job without insurances. You know, the government should provide that for people we employ and set a model. I'd like to take a moment also to remember that violence intervention is a tactic in reducing gun violence, but it's not the whole of a holistic approach. My interaction with neighbors show there's been a lot of confusion in the public about what violence intervention programs are or what safe passage programs do. They hear it as something they can ask for after shooting, and it's often recommended to them in situations that aren't appropriate, even in neighborhoods where shootings have happened. So something needs to happen, but maybe that's not it. Then they get frustrated because they want something to happen. They want it to happen quickly. In this room, we know intervention work is one step to keeping the immediate peace while we do longer term work to really get at that root cause. I'm also concerned with recent scandals that there's a lot of scrutiny and skepticism towards the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement and this important work. I hope that in the community engagement pieces, one of the stakeholders considered is the, I don't want to say skeptical, but questioning resident, people who just don't know about this kind of work and aren't sure what to think of, especially when they're stressed. And in neighborhoods where there's just not the opportunity to build trust because they haven't gotten to know the people doing the work or getting to know the office. And definitely as budget season comes around. I'm glad to see that the peace plan also includes holding a public hearing on the evidence-based gun violence reduction and prevention plan. That reads to me like the strategic planning that many people have been talking about. I would see that that level of work is crucial because it has people in authority in the respective organizations coming to the table, and that it would amplify the work of the advisory panel. And also, we're not that far away from the next election cycle. I've seen so much progress since I've started coming to the Wilson Building in 2019 on these issues, particularly amongst the various council members. And so I really see the need to lock in the successes we have now, because who knows what the future is going to bring. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hodge. I'm going to turn now to Marcus Ellis, Deputy of Impact for Cities United.
Good afternoon, council member. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome, thank you. Good afternoon, and once again, my name is Marcus Ellis. I serve as the Deputy of Impact for Cities United. At Cities United, we believe that every community deserves the right to be safe, healthy, and hopeful. Since 2011, Cities United has been a leader in advocating for holistic approaches to gun violence nationally. By working closely with stakeholders at every level, we are working to end the epidemic of shootings and homicides amongst young Black men and boys. I must state that it was my intention to be with you all in person today. However, the CVI community across our country, to include DC, is in crisis mode. Yesterday, the Department of Justice, led by Trump, cut funding at an amount of approximately $532 million, causing a serious strain in our field. I share this to say I appreciate that the proposed Peace DC legislation keeps the importance of CVI at the forefront of public safety in DC and is a key component in our ecosystem. In my former roles as Chief of Staff at the WAN's office and ED for Peace for DC, I've supported this merger of our CVI programs. I still believe this is extremely important. Equally important is that our city has a true comprehensive strategic plan that supports this merger. We know what it is, and we understand that public safety is an ecosystem, and without the proper surroundings, CVI cannot be successful. The Peace DC legislation requires that WANS has a framework that is based on best practices and offers the supports the CVI needs. The current ward-based model is not that. It's not based on best practices, and it is not rooted in a data-based approach. As part of this merger, I highly suggest that we revisit this and mandate that WANS operate from a true evidence-based model versus one created without a proven track record of data-driven successes. I like to reinforce the thought that government cannot do this alone, not just in practice, but financially as well. More than ever, DC needs philanthropy and business to support this work, and I do mean with additional funding. The cuts by federal government will continue, and we know that healing, restoration, and fair first chances are not a part of the current administrator's agenda. In closing, you will continue to hear from city leaders that violent crime is down, and this is true. However, arrest rates are also higher, and so are the rates of people being detained. We've seen this before. We can't arrest our way out of this problem. It truly is a full public ecosystem approach that's needed. Chief Smith stated that she believes that violence interrupters are a huge factor in our public safety ecosystem. I appreciate your leadership, CM, and thank you for being a consistent partner in this work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ellis. And on behalf of all of us in DC, we are very sorry for everybody nationally who's dealing with these cuts and these challenges and trying to determine how we're going to move forward with this kind of last minute change in DOJ policy. So thank you very much. Commissioner Kathy Henderson, ANC Commissioner in Ward 5.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Councilmember Pinto, for allowing me to express myself in this hearing. I am Commissioner Kathy Henderson. I am an award-winning 11-term effective, having served just a really an effective term, 11 terms as an advisory neighborhood commissioner. I'm actually here in my capacity as the coordinator for 5D Court Watch. And please know that I have the utmost respect and admiration for you and the work that you're doing to promote our public safety. First, the rise of the violence, and I'm just going to make a few key points and submit my very lengthy testimony to you for the record. First, the rise of the violence interrupter program and the Cure the Streets program have come at the expense of our Metropolitan Police Department, both in reputation and actually in money. I believe that the merger is merely a distraction, and I would urge you to move forward with the Peace for DC plan and put the merger of the two programs on a separate trajectory so that you can really focus on the efficacy and fix the problems, because there are many. The OAG is very smart to support the merger at this point, because it's basically a political football. OAG can't have it both ways. They can't say that they are providing an evidence-based model, that's of what these organizations are supposed to be doing, yet not know that the face of that model is a suspect in multiple homicides. That you just cannot have it both ways. There's a lapse there. There's clearly a lapse there. Neither I nor the DC Council have the authority to request an audit of the Richmond, California program or the other programs that claim to work around the country. But we do know, based on clear and compelling evidence and facts, that these programs are not working here. These programs have come, like, for instance, nobody knows my community better than I do. No one. And the people who live here. We had a 64% reduction in crime, yet the proponents of this so-called violence interrupter, Cure the Streets model, what they did was really insidious. They actually came back into areas that the police, working with the community, had liberated, and they're operating again. These people who are members of these so-called organizations, they are selling drugs, they're loitering, they're even dropping dead bodies in our community. Right, if you go right now to Rose's Liquor Store at 830 Bladensburg Road, you will see a throng of people out there milling about, selling illegal items, and they are not our residents. They're not even DC residents, they're Maryland residents. We have Maryland residents selling loose cigarettes, doing all kinds of things. We have in the One's office at 1209 Mount Olivet Road, on any given day, you can see cars parked on the sidewalk with Maryland and Virginia tags. On Montello and Rom, you can see tags, people clearly selling drugs with Virginia and Maryland tags. Then we have these
I'm sorry to interrupt you. You're over time. If I could ask you to summarize and wrap up.
Okay, and thank you, I will, because these are some serious issues that we need to address. I will say this, where are the reports? Where are these reports of debriefings? Where are these reports of interactions that prevented recidivism? Because it's a small group of people that are continuing to commit crimes, and they are proponents of recidivism. So where are their reports? Where are their debriefings? We don't have any. They're not interacting with the police. They are not providing information. And I support the police chief, and I support her efforts to embrace the goals of the administration. But if you really want to be honest about what's working, this program isn't working. MPD is working harder. The citizens are working harder. And I thank you again for all that you're doing and for the opportunity to be heard today. And would you please remind us of when the record for this roundtable closes so that we may get our testimony in to be part of the public record?
Right now, the record is set to close on May 7th for the merger.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm open to any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. I want to ask you, Mr. Ellis and Mr. McFadden, as you all were there at inception of ones being stood up and this work, kind of what was implemented then that is going well, that really should be continued and built in? There's been a lot of discussion about the CURE model and kind of learning from the successes of OAG and making sure that's not lost. But as we think about the infrastructure of ones, what would you say as you look back that is something that's been working that we really need to make sure is maintained?
I think a very powerful piece is the Pathways program. I think being able to look at your highest risk individuals, whether they're referred through CSOSA, being able to identify them because they meet a certain criteria, and bring them in and provide hope, care, and let them know that you want the best for them. I think that program continues to support those key individuals, and that's a strong piece of the violence reduction. I think also Marcus and I traveled the United States, being at the One's office, looking at programs, taking the best pieces, whether it's ROCA or UTEC or Homeboy Industries, looking at the original One's office. So we took those things of really looking at the highest risk individuals and having relentless pursuit, showing up wherever they show up at. And being able to provide the great thing about government and the support from the exec is being able to streamline and provide a red carpet for individuals. And what I mean by that is you don't have 2-3 weeks to wait for these resources. You need these resources. You need some short wins. You can have some wins 30, 60 days down the road, but you need some short wins to keep the attention of the individuals that you're working with because of the level of trauma, the deprivation that's in the communities. And I think having a good system to check up on the violence prevention and intervention work. One of the things I did as the executive director, I popped up at any time of day to check on the community-based organizations to make sure the work was being done. And I had just an amazing relationship with the CBOs. So I think those are the things. I'm not so much in the know now of what's going on at the One's office, but those are the things that I think are key. Those resources are key. Following the data, you have to be able to know exactly what's taking place when it comes to crime. One of the things that Marcus and I looked at was the key age group of those who were committing the most violence, that 20 to 25, and then 25 to 30, we contribute that to brain development, things of that nature, things that we got from professors at Harvard when we visited Harvard. So there's a lot of nuances and pieces that I can speak about, but those are the things. When it comes, I'm not going to be long-winded, but when it comes to, you like too late, but when it comes to the cure model, what I really appreciate, Gabby is our person from the OAG's office. There's very little gray areas. Everything from your daily logs, from your goals to your referrals, your mediations, your interruptions, all that is spelled out, even down to how much public education materials you pass out to the community. So there's not a lot of space, to make. There's not a lot of space for you to kind of mess it up because we're always being monitored, and that support is remarkable, I must say.
Thank you so much. No, I really, really appreciate all of those examples. And I would love to build that in to this system because there have been so many great lessons learned over the last couple of years that should not be lost in the transition. So thank you. Bless you. Mr. Ellis, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure, and I'll be brief. I think that, Dale hit it, the Pathways program, and I'll give you a quick example of an individual without using his name. When that program started, this was a person-based approach, and we had a gentleman that come into the program who was homeless, couch surfing, had significant gun charges. And when he came into the Pathways program, he was a person looking for a fair first chance. And he received that in the Pathways program. That person was able to gain housing, to gain custody of his children, and is actually working, in the Wilson building now, making a very decent salary, a picture no one would have painted for him previously. And so those are the types of things that we see and we know can work. I think that, working with Dr. Webster and Dr. Joe Richardson, we have to really identify what is the model we need to be doing, right? So you have community-based models, but you also have person-based models that focus on the individual. And there's an opportunity to explore if that's what's best for our city or if it's a combination of the two. But yeah, Pathways is a huge success. I must say, though, we have to continue to invest in that program and show up for it. The same way that you've shown up, council member, for the Peace Academy and the graduations that we appreciate. I think that we need the folks from our mayor's office to continue to show up in person at the graduations so that folks can see that that they believe in this work and believe in the people involved. And so I echo the sentiments of Dale. Pathways has been a success and should continue to be with the proper investment.
Well, thank you so much. I think that's a really important point too about the kind of follow-up to hope that we're talking about building in people and providing support for, because one of the issues that I've grappled with is we can't have one agency be all things to all people. And we recognize that, but we also need to understand the human needs that may be present with our highest risk individuals at risk of gun violence. And so I think Pathways is an important example of how that can be done really well. And I also want ones to stay really focused on the people most at risk of gun violence and connecting them all to these resources. So I appreciate that context, and to both of you again for all the work that you've done. Commissioner Henderson, I just want to ask you about something extremely troubling that you said, that people were bringing dead bodies to the neighborhood. Can you elaborate on what you meant by that?
Yes, absolutely. On Saturday, there was a dead body dumped at the Heckendra Mall in one of the dumpsters that is used by our businesses. You know, that person, the decedent, was not killed in the district. I mean, they brought that body to us. We are, there is an effort to continue to drag our community backwards, with these violent acts. These people are coming here, they've taken over, they continue to take over. The Starburst Plaza, the police just finished a drug-free zone around the Starburst Plaza. Yeah, yet, these people, they continue to come in from other places. They take the X2, they tell you, if you talk to them, they tell you where they come from. They come from Maryland, and they still want to sit in that park and deny us the opportunities to enjoy our reduced crime rates. So the crime that's being committed in our community, these crimes are being committed. And if you look at the homicides that have happened recently, some of the victims have been Maryland residents coming back, being committed by other persons. We don't have violent people in the neighborhood committing violent acts. These are people coming from the community, and then we have a network that is keeping them there. We have a network of individuals that want to have cookouts and clothing giveaways to constantly attract a throng of dysfunctional people to our community. We have Narcan boxes all over the place that nobody wants, which is a waste of our taxpayer dollars. I mean, this is just unacceptable. If we believe so much that these violence interrupter programs work, then they need to be supported by actual metrics that show that they work. Right now, we don't have that. There needs to be stakeholder engagement. No, our stakeholder engagement is with the police. And we also need to, one of the earlier panelists, he alluded to something. He's almost there. He talked about how, the perpetuators of violence and who are steeply involved in recidivism, they don't have a high school education. No, it goes deeper than that. They can barely read. The individual that I constantly talk about, who is the face, who is incarcerated now for yet another alleged homicide, his literacy skills are poor. I know that because I've seen examples of his literacy skills. Yeah. And when you have young men who cannot read, when they have relationships, they want to take control of the relationships. They want their women to respect them. Our domestic violence rates go up, and then they go out and get access to a gun so that they can be heard. Communication is power. And what they don't have is the ability to communicate effectively, orally or in writing. So they're committing violence. So we can talk about this, but let's get to the real root causes of why we have a small community of people continuing to perpetuate violence and going back into communities to now get some taxpayer dollars to say that they're doing work that we know the police are doing.
Okay, well, thank you, Commissioner. We're certainly going to follow up with you about the allegation of a body being dumped. That is extremely disconcerting.
Of course, thank you.
And thank you for mentioning the importance of literacy. I completely agree. A couple of years ago, we started a literacy task force, and last year I funded training for all of our kindergarten and first grade teachers to teach students how to read. This year, I'm hoping we can expand that to later grades as well, because by the time our kids get to fourth grade, only a third of them are reading at grade level, and that's just not acceptable.
Absolutely.
And we've got to start earlier. And speaking of earlier, I want to ask you, Ms. Gilbert, in working with Peace for DC and the folks who are coming in, what are some of the most consistent areas that have become present to you that people highlight if some earlier intervention would have happened, could have helped them be more successful?
The fact that because the Peace Academy brings all of the neighborhoods together, if they had that rich, if they had that rich networking and things, some of the situations could have been mediated a lot sooner. The Peace Academy does offer that, and they are the only place that offers the networking between different neighborhoods, and they're able to navigate and come together and settle some of the ongoing beefs and some of the beefs that are coming about throughout the neighborhoods.
Thank you.
You're
That's
welcome.
helpful. Okay, well, I want to thank everybody on this panel and who has testified today. I really like, Del, what you said about relentless pursuit, and that's kind of my takeaway commitment to you all, is that I and my team and our committee will have a relentless pursuit to get this right and to make sure that we can move forward with a system of violence interruption in our city that plays an important part of our public safety ecosystem, where people are paid a fair wage and honored for their work, where there is consistent training and support, where we are honoring the improvements that have been made over the last couple of years and recognizing where some changes need to happen. And that is my commitment to you all, that we will relentlessly pursue this work and getting this right. And thank you all for being such a huge part of this. As I said earlier, the conversation does not end today or tomorrow. We'll talk to government witnesses tomorrow for many other aspects of the Peace DC plan and several different bills. And then at a later date, we're going to have another roundtable with our government witnesses to talk about the merger. And we will continue to proceed that way. But in the meantime, please reach out to me and my team. We would love to hear from folks. If you didn't get the opportunity to testify today, the record will also stay open until May 7th. And we're going to continue working on this every day and working on our larger implementation of Peace DC, which really aims to recognize that public safety issues are complicated and building sustainable peace does not come from one new bill or one new idea. It comes from empowering our young people and supporting neighborhood harmony. It comes from really preventing violence and ensuring that these strategies are working. It comes from supporting the entirety of our public safety workforce. And it comes from reducing recidivism and setting people up for success once they have come home. And so we're going to relentlessly pursue all of those strategies because we know they're all important and continue to do so in partnership with the community. So thank you all again.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to turn to Mr. McFadden,
Yeah,
who has one final
I'd be
thought.
remiss not to add this piece. I know we don't do an amazing job at it, but I really want people who are watching this to understand the position and the job of a violence interrupter. We have, and they normalize it. It shouldn't be normalized, but violence occurs too many times here in the District of Columbia, especially in Ward 8. I have, talking to my staff, they're hiding under vehicles because they're shootouts. That's not normal. I have to tell them, hey, like, you need to take a day off, mental health day. We need to talk about this. Unfortunately, there was a shooting in one of our communities where one of our staff members was coming out the store and had to drag a young man to safety after he was shot in a multiple shooting that happened in that community. So VRs are out there. They are credible. They have amazing relationships. We couldn't do this work without them. So, you know, I take my hat off. I don't know if I could do it today, to be honest. I take my hat off to all the violence interrupters here in the District of Columbia. And just like we owe the residents of the District of Columbia, we owe the VIs and the OWs as well to provide them with the tools to do their job effectively. Because as the young man stated today, we have VIs who've been shot. We have VIs who's no longer here today. They gave the ultimate sacrifice of their life in doing this work. So I just want people to really understand
crimes.
dedication to this work.
Thank you, Mr. McFadden. Sure, go ahead, Ms. Gilbert.
All right, just want to say one thing, the importance of the Peace Academy as well. Mr. Johnson is an alumni of the Peace Academy, and we are very proud of the people that come through and complete it. Some of them move on as social workers and want to further their careers in public safety. And so we're not just teaching them for that 14 weeks, we're teaching them to try to expand and move forward to better serve the communities.
Well, I can think of no better way to end than those closing remarks. Thank you all so much. And thank you to everybody who does this work. With that, and thank you to my team for a great all-day hearing. Appreciate it. With that, the time is 4:55 p.m. and we are